There are three things Padre Pio kept saying that nobody wanted to hear. Not warnings about the end of the world, not prophecies about wars or disasters. Something quieter than that, and because of that, far more dangerous. He was describing something that was already happening inside ordinary Christians, in ordinary parishes, across an ordinary century, and he said it was going to get worse. He was right. The three things he described have not just come true. They have become so normal that most people living inside them cannot feel them anymore. That is exactly what he said would happen. And that is what makes this worth your full attention right now. He met them in the confessional, one after another, for decades. Tens of thousands over a lifetime. Each one opening like a landscape before him, every hidden corner visible, every wound he had not been told about already apparent the moment a person sat down. He understood the human soul the way a shepherd understands terrain he has spent his whole life working. He knew its weaknesses, its patterns, the kinds of damage it sustained in different conditions, the signs of health and the signs of disease. And from that depth of direct contact, not theory, not books, not second-hand reports, he spoke. Those who were close to him, who gathered his letters and preserved the things he said in conversation, carried three specific observations forward through the decades. Three things he kept returning to. Three things he saw moving through the souls of people in his age that he knew would only grow stronger. It was not the recitation of words in a particular sequence. Prayer was the place where a soul and God actually made contact, where the membrane between the human person and the source of all being became thin enough to feel. He prayed the way lungs breathe. Not because he chose to, but because without it, he could not survive. And what he saw, watching the souls that came to him year after year, was a gradual sealing of that membrane, not broken, not torn away, sealed over from the inside by distraction, by noise, by a world that had learned to keep every waking moment full. The spiritual life is like a well. It needs to be opened, visited, drawn from. Left sealed, it does not run dry immediately. But the person who never opens it slowly forgets it is there. They begin to get their water from other places, from distraction, from the noise that a busy life provides as a substitute for actual nourishment. They do not feel the thirst acutely, because they are always drinking something. But what they are drinking does not satisfy, and the thirst deepens without them recognizing it as thirst at all. His deeper worry was for the soul that still called itself a believer, still sat in a pew on Sunday, still lit candles to the saints, but had lost the living center, the form without the fire, the structure without the encounter. He had seen enough souls near death to know what a person looks like when the interior life is genuinely alive, and he had seen what it looks like when it has been running on fumes for so long that the person no longer remembers what the flame felt like. Look at the world around you. Count the minutes given, in an average week, to genuine interior quiet. Not background music while doing something else, not a rushed prayer in the car, but actual, deliberate stillness. The warning did not stay in the future. It is the ordinary condition of the Christian life in the West right now. Padre Pio spent more time in the confessional than anywhere else on earth. He knew the confession of sin the way a surgeon knows anatomy, from thousands of hours inside it, not from textbooks. He was not a gentle confessor by reputation. Among the testimonies preserved by those who experienced it, there are accounts of people being sent away with unfinished business, told to come back when they were ready to be honest, of sins he named before they were spoken, of penitents who left that small wooden box fundamentally different from how they arrived, shaken, sometimes weeping, sometimes furious, but alive in a way they had not been before. What made this possible was not cruelty. What made it possible was precision. He could feel the difference between a conscience that was alive and suffering and a conscience that had gone cold. He had far more patience with a person overwhelmed by guilt than with someone who arrived at the confessional as a formality. moving through the sacrament the way a man moves through a customs line. Required, routine, fundamentally unchanged by it. What he feared was the quiet movement of the line, the slow, almost invisible process by which something that used to trouble a person stops troubling them. Not because it has been resolved, because they have decided to call it something else, or stopped calling it anything at all. A man with a certain kind of internal injury can feel perfectly fine while the damage spreads. The pain stops, not because healing has occurred, but because the nerve endings have been compromised. The absence of pain is not health. It is a symptom. And what Padre Pio saw coming was a generation that would confuse the absence of guilt with the presence of goodness. By 1,000 small surrenders made by 1,000 ordinary people across a generation, each one reasoning that the adjustment was minor, that surely God understood, that surely this particular thing was too small to matter. A doctor can be the most loving person in the room, and still the patient who denies he is sick will leave the office unchanged. His warning has become the landscape of the ordinary spiritual life in the world he could already see coming. The confessionals are not empty because everyone is holy. Look honestly at what has happened to the examination of conscience, at what gets called sin, and what gets called a personal choice, and what gets called nobody's business. The line has moved. Padre Pio saw it moving. He tried to stop it, confession by confession, one soul at a time. What it was like to be him, standing at that altar, morning after morning, for decades. Those who attended his Mass, and people came from hundreds of kilometers away, waiting in lines that stretched out of the church and down the road, described an atmosphere in that small church that they did not have the vocabulary for. They said the air changed. They said time moved differently. Many wept without knowing why. Some said they felt, for the first time, that the altar was genuinely real. Not a representation of something that happened 2,000 years ago, but a point where the distance between then and now had completely collapsed. The same sacrifice. And he felt it in his own body, which is why the Mass took him so long, why he gripped the altar, why his face during the consecration was so difficult to look at directly. He was not performing grief. He was inside something. He had been pulled into it the way you are pulled into a current in deep water, not by choice, but by proximity to something with enormous force. It was about the interior posture, the disposition of a soul approaching something that is, in the deepest possible sense, impossible to approach casually without sustaining a loss. Not a punishment for carelessness, a deprivation caused by it. The encounter that was meant to change you happens. The grace is there, the door is open, but the soul walks past looking at the floor, and it leaves the altar unchanged. Week after week, year after year, it comes and goes without ever receiving what it came for, because it never once looked up. The holy becoming simply a category of the pleasant, something people were glad existed, without being seriously altered by it. Padre Pio stood at the altar and wept because he could not do otherwise. Not as a spiritual exercise, not as an example for others, because the reality he was standing inside demanded that response from him, the way standing too close to a great heat demands that you shield your face. His warning was that a generation which grows so comfortable with the sacred that it no longer trembles before it has traded the most valuable thing a human being can possess for the comfort of never being disturbed. The numbing of the conscience makes it impossible to feel the weight of what stands before you at the altar. And when the weight at the altar is no longer felt, the whole structure of the spiritual life, still externally present, still officially intact, becomes a building with no one inside. The lights are on, the doors are open, the building is empty, slow, painless, almost imperceptible until it becomes severe. A person in this condition can function. They can look fine. They can pass every external measure of a religious life. But inside, something is quietly running out. He had watched grace find a crack so small that a human eye would miss it and pour through that crack with a force that undid everything the darkness had built. He had seen the reversal happen in the confessional, at the altar, through letters, through a guardian angel sent across the sea. He knew it was possible at every point short of final death, but he also knew that the reversal became harder the further the drift had gone, and that waiting carried a cost that no one wanted to pay at the end. They are a mirror, 5 minutes of genuine silence where you are not reaching for anything, not planning anything, not filling the space with noise. 5 minutes of actual stillness in which you make yourself available to something you cannot control and cannot manufacture. That is where the interior life begins. That is the door Padre Pio was describing. It opens from the inside. They are questions for a quiet room and a willing heart. And the answers, however uncomfortable, are the beginning of recovery. Padre Pio spent decades gripping that altar because the Mass was that real to him. He did not perform devotion, he encountered something. And that encounter is available to anyone willing to stop treating it like furniture. Recognition is the first breath after the drift. It means the door is still there. It means the silence can be rebuilt. It means the conscience is alive enough to feel the warning landing. He is not here anymore to hold the line in person.